Good morning. My name is Macy, and for my presentation, I chose to do Succession, which is an HBO series. All right. So, a little overview of the family. The Roy family is a very wealthy, super high profile media dynasty. They have their father, Logan Roy, is the patriarch. He's extremely controlling, emotionally manipulative, emotionally distant. And then he's got 4 adult children: Kendall, Shiv, Roman, and Connor, and they all basically compete throughout the whole series for his approval. It's very dysfunctional. The system is just defined basically by this power struggle. There's a lot of emotional neglect, and a lot of conflicting loyalties. They're basically all just loyal to themselves while, like I said, competing for their father's approval at the same time. And I focused the study on Kendall, who's the middle son, struggles with cocaine, alcohol, pills, and he's clearly the addict in the family. Even though it could be argued they're all addicted to something in some way, Kendall is the one that has like a substance use problem. Yeah. Okay, and then based on this model, like I said, the identified addict would be Kendall, and his addiction is a huge focus of the family's attention. And then you've got the father, Logan. He's enabling, controlling, and he uses his money and his power to basically hide all the issues in the family rather than resolve them. Then you've got Shiv, the daughter, who's, the hero. Outwardly, she appears strong, and inside, she's very emotional. And then you've got Roman, who is the scapegoat, the clown, you could say. He definitely uses humor throughout the entire show to deflect pain, and you get glimpses of his emotional pain, and it's extremely present. He's in a lot of pain, and basically just jokes about everything all the time, again, deflecting from that. And then Connor, who you actually rarely see throughout the show. He's usually not physically near the rest of the family. He's very emotionally detached, and he avoids conflict entirely. And in a way, they're all very childlike. And obviously, as we learned from this model, this helps sustain the dysfunction, and it keeps it going, keeping emotions suppressed to the point where they can't be handled, and it prevents anything from changing. Some theoretical approaches I chose were structural family therapy, and the goal is restructuring the system, the family system, and clarifying boundaries. And then some of the issues that are presented with this are enmeshment, lack of boundaries, power imbalances, just because of how the family's set up. Some interventions would be like strengthening sibling relationships and their kind of like alliance instead of every man for himself, working more as a team, reducing the father's over involvement. Like I said, the power dynamics are like they're all fighting for his approval, and he has all the power, and he's very manipulative, and only concerned for himself. And another thing would be to create new patterns of communication, because there's basically none at this point, right? And if they are, they're dysfunctional. They're like communicating through their actions is what I see. Then there's the Bowen family systems theory, which focuses on intergenerational patterns and differentiation of the self. And That would involve exploring emotional cutoffs between the father and children, addressing the son, the one that struggles with substance use disorder, um, addressing his basically lack of self, because he's tied basically his whole being into his father and how his father sees him and the rest of the family. And making like a map of the family's triangles and alliances and the things that keep feeding into this dysfunction. CBFT focus would be identifying negative thought patterns. I always thought this was a very simple kind of therapy. Not simple, but easy to understand, and I would say a lot harder to implement. And that challenges the beliefs like being vulnerable means I'm weak. Teaches emotional regulation and utilizes things like behavioral contracts. Some assessments that would involve FACES IV, like family adaptability and cohesion. ASI, which is Addiction Severity Index, the FQ Family Questionnaire, and genograms, mapping intergenerational patterns, stuff like that. Some potential interventions, structural interventions, like redefining boundaries and everybody's individual roles. Again, CBFT, teaching better communication skills. And then I like the idea of psychoeducation, which is basically, to me, it seems normalizing addiction as a disease and working from there rather than what this family does is, first of all, covers things up and hides it because they have a lot of power and money. And they also, even in their own bubble, they ignore the issue because I believe everyone's so uncomfortable and like emotionally illiterate, basically, that they don't know how to handle anything. So I think psychoeducation is super important for a lot of families. And then some potential barriers in counseling. Something I see in the real world a lot, but definitely in the show it was super prevalent, would be denial and minimizing things. This is almost, it's not necessarily pretending they're not there. Well, denial is, but the minimization is like almost acknowledging the problem, but making it as if it's not that bad. And then the power imbalance. The father's dominance in this family is absolutely insane. It's almost like none of the kids have any chance. And it really hinders any kind of communication of anything real. Another barrier is the fear of being vulnerable. Again, I've seen this a lot in the real world. This is a huge barrier, I feel like, for a lot of people, including myself. But in this family, they basically equate any emotions or feelings with weakness. Being open and honest is not seen as a strength. It's weak. You do anything and everything to have the most power and come out on top, even if it means hurting the people around you or hurting yourself. As long as you appear strong and you have the most money and power, anything other than that is seen as a weakness. So this can obviously hinder any kind of emotional communication, any kind of emotional work, any kind of working on the real problems that are lying underneath all of this wealth and power. And then this is something I mean, I've seen it sort of with people that I know where their public image is above all else. And certainly for this show, like I said, they're a very wealthy, well-known, famous family. So they want to be seen as a wealthy, famous family that has it all together. And this can prevent people from getting any kind of help. Uh, Again, like substance use in particular, or any kind of addiction almost, has still an incredibly negative stigma. Makes it really hard for people to get the help that they need. Many people resist seeking help because of how it's going to look. What if somebody finds out I'm in counseling? What if somebody finds out I'm in um, marriage therapy? You know, a lot of people at least want to be seen as put together, smart, wealthy, powerful, whatever it is. There's still so much stigma surrounding any kind of mental health. I think it's gotten a lot better, certainly in the last, 10, 20 years, but I still know people that don't go to therapy because they're scared someone will find out they're in therapy. As someone that's had a lot of therapy, I find this insane. But there are people that, because of, again, their family dynamics, have caused them to see anything emotional as a weakness, and they feel so much shame that it hinders them from getting any kind of help. Yeah. And then some of the resources that I listed here, and I did it for Florida because that's where we are, even though the show does take place in New York. I thought it would be, I don't know, more helpful to do Florida resources. Seem more relevant. I found this called the Hanley Foundation, which offers family support programs and some psychoeducation. Obviously, a big one is 12-step family programs. There's 12-step programs, AA, NA. There's a lot of them. And then there's the family program side of that, which is like Al-Anon and Nar-Anon, which is for the family members of the people struggling with substance use disorder, which can be incredibly helpful. Again, a lot of it's education. People don't know how to deal with things that they don't know anything about. A big one in our area is the Behavioral Health Center of the Treasure Coast. And I actually work for a nonprofit program where we use a lot of these. And there is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and it's a 24/7 helpline you can call if you're struggling with anything from, depression to like suicidal ideation. I know that they've helped a lot of people. National Institute on Drug Abuse. This is a good one for education, a lot of research on family treatment models. And then something that I discovered quite a while ago I found was interesting was Smart Recovery. I don't have a lot of personal experience with this, but I've heard of this one a lot, and I've heard a lot of it, stories of it helping people, because, AA or 12-step programs are not for everybody. You hear that a lot. It's certainly saved a lot of lives, but for people who struggle with these, I have found that they usually talk very highly of this Smart Recovery. And apparently they have, just like the 12-step programs, they have a program for the family and loved ones of the people struggling. Because when somebody is struggling with any kind of addiction, it really touches everybody around them on some level. Alright, and then here are some of the references I used, and that is my presentation on the Roy family. I just thought it was really interesting. I watched the show a few years ago, but as I was watching it, just being in school for this kind of stuff, I found it very interesting, and I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful show. But also, it's, like I said, it's very thought-provoking if you're in this field. Just how dysfunctional this family is. it really makes you think. It's very interesting. So again, if you're in this field, I highly recommend watching this show. It's almost hard to watch because of how dysfunctional this family is. It's very sad. It's really sad. And another thing that's so interesting about this is like this family's not um, what you would think when you think of addiction. Again, they cover it up so well because of the wealth and the power. And it just makes it so much harder for them to get better. All right. Anyways, that's my presentation on Succession. And thank you for giving me the time and listening.